Hey guys, it's Miss Vegetellum. Um, we are going to be talking about types of organisms this week. So last week we talked about photosynthesis and we talked about how plants are producers. So that is one type of organism. But then we have another type called consumers, and those are actually broken down into smaller categories too. So that's what this lesson is going to be about. Just a quick overview of your week before we begin the lesson. So this will be a little different for if you're in Miss Carlini's class, and then I have a copy for Miss Vegetellum's class because the hyperlinks are different. But otherwise, all the work is the same. So you are going to watch the lesson that we are about to start and then answer these two questions. After that, I want you to check out this website. It goes over producers and consumers again. And then I would like you to try the food chain game. So we're starting food chains next week, but let's see how you do with food chains this week. So in this picture, you can see where the game is circled there. That's how you access the game. Try it out and see how well you do. Then you have the Ed Puzzle video. Once you click the link, it will take you right there. Just make sure you sign in with Google. It's a 6-minute video with embedded questions to answer as you go along so I can see your understanding. And then finally, for Tuesday, I want you to keep practicing the vocabulary. So I've been saying that the ecology unit has a lot of vocabulary in it. So there's a lot of vocabulary this week. There are 11 words in the Quizlet just for this week. So go ahead and start practicing those. Then for Thursday, there's a vocabulary assignment called ecosystems. So if you go on vocabulary, that's assigned for you. And then I would like you to play the quizzes that is linked right here. If you click it, it should take you right there. But if it doesn't, I have the code embedded in both of the links here. You can see that they're different if you're in Vegetellum's class compared to if you're in Carlini's class. But if you click it, I want you to take it and I want you to use your real name. So log in with Google. Don't put, I know some of you like putting like cash money or, crazy cool or other crazy names that I wouldn't know who it is. I want you to put your name that I know you by. So that way I can use this as a way to see your understanding from the week. So then the final thing is to keep working on that vocabulary. So I have from week 1, week 2, and then week 3. So those are all the Quizlets that you can keep practicing that vocabulary because that's really important in this unit. So let's get started with what are types of organisms. So a type of organism, let's present it here, can be classified as producers or consumers. So we're going to start there. So last week we talked about producers and how plants are producers because they take the sun's energy and go through a process called photosynthesis to make their own food for energy. Now, we cannot do that. We do not go through a process called photosynthesis. We have to eat to get energy, right? We have to eat breakfast, lunch, dinner, a snack to have energy. So we are considered a consumer. Animals that can't make their own food have to get energy somehow. So we have to eat. There are multiple types of consumers. They can be categorized in different ways. So the different consumers are herbivores, omnivores, carnivores, scavengers, parasites, and decomposers. And in the next few slides, we're going to look at each type of consumer individually to see what makes them that category and to see how they play an important role in our ecosystem. And next week, when we look at food chains and food webs, knowing this vocabulary will help us figure out how a food chain and food web work. So it's very important that you pay attention. So herbivores. Herbivores are organisms that get their energy from consuming plants, and they can range in size from a tiny insect to an enormous elephant. An elephant would be considered an herbivore. So if they are only eating producers, they're only eating plants, it's considered an herbivore. So if you've ever heard of your parents cooking, grandparents cooking, maybe even you cook, And you've heard of using herbs before, and it's spelled Herb. So herbs are like parsley, cilantro, thyme, chives. Trying to think of other ones. There's lots of herbs that you can use in cooking to make your food taste good. Rosemary, there's lots of different ones. And those are all plants. So when I think of herbivores, you have the word herb right there, which is plants. And that's what these animals eat. That's all they eat. So you have a few examples too: a cow, a giraffe, a rabbit, right? A chipmunk. There are a lot of different types of herbivores. Um, I'm just giving you a few pictures of each type of consumer on each slide. So then the next one we're going to talk about is omnivores. So organisms that get their energy from consuming plants and animals are considered an omnivore. So most humans are probably omnivores unless you're a vegetarian or vegan. And they again can range in size from a tiny insect to human size. So you can see some examples here. A bear is an omnivore, right? They eat fish, they eat berries. You have a pig that's an omnivore. They eat corn, they eat lettuce, but they also eat insects, which would be considered meat, right? We don't think of insects as meat, maybe, but insects are meat. So a pig would be an omnivore. And then we have the human, which has a picture there of a hamburger. So you have all sorts of things going on. You have the lettuce, which is a producer, but then you have the meat, which probably is a cow, so it was once an herbivore. And then you have the bun, which, if you think of how you make bread, you have wheat, which is a plant. You have egg, which is from a chicken. So you have all sorts of different producers and consumers in your hamburger that you're eating. Yeah, kind of crazy to think about. Then you have carnivores. So carnivores are organisms that get their energy from consuming other animals, right? They're meat eaters. You think of T-Rex when you think of a carnivore. They can range in size from a tiny insect to large organisms like a polar bear. There's even a carnivorous plant that's called the Venus flytrap. So I have that picture down there in the left corner. So it does go through photosynthesis, but it also has to get energy from another source because it doesn't get enough energy through photosynthesis. So it is eating a fly, as you can see in there. Carnivores are sometimes called a predator when they are hunting for their food. And then the animal that they are hunting is called their prey. So you have a sea lion there and then a lion also, that are all examples of carnivores. So herbivores, omnivores, and carnivores are one way you can classify consumers. Another way we can classify them is, are they a scavenger? So if we call an organism a scavenger, that means they're getting their energy from consuming dead plants and animals. Okay, so many scavengers are actually also considered carnivores because they're only eating dead animals. So you have hyenas, you have turkey vultures, you have vultures. They kind of just feed on the dead carcasses that are laying around. You've probably seen it a lot when you're driving down the road or riding down the road, right? You're not old enough to drive yet. When you're riding down the road with your parents or your grandparents or friends, and you see that there's a dead possum or skunk in the road, and then there's birds that are right there waiting for your car to pass so they can continue scavenging on the bird. Or not bird. Well, maybe it's a bird in the road. The possum or skunk or raccoon, whatever's dead in the road. So those would be considered scavengers, but they could also be carnivores if they're only eating meat. So I kind of, even though it's gross, think about if we didn't have scavengers, what would be laying around all over. So they're kind of helping clean up the ecosystem and the environment by eating the dead things that are laying around and decaying object or organisms. Then you have parasites. So a parasite is an organism that gets their energy and shelter. So it means they like live either on you or in you, right? They're taking shelter from another organism. So some examples that you probably are aware of with parasites would be mosquitoes. Mosquitoes are a parasite. Ticks, fleas are all parasites, right? You don't want your animal to have ticks or fleas. You don't want you to have ticks or fleas. Um, they're taking nutrients from you so they can live, but then they're also living on your body, which is not good. So parasites are kind of icky to think about too. And then there's even internal parasites like worms. You can see at the bottom picture. You might remember when you first got your dog or cat, or even sometimes they get them when they're older, where you have to take them to the vet because they have worms. You might have heard that. It's an internal parasite that is inside their body taking nutrients from them and can cause harm if you don't take them to the vet and get it taken care of. So those are all some examples of parasites. But even though they're gross, guys, they do play a vital role in the ecosystem without them. And then we have decomposers. So decomposers are kind of gross too, but without them, our earth would not look as pretty as it does. So they are organisms that get their energy from breaking down dead plants and animals. So when they break down the dead plants and animals, they take those nutrients and put them back in the soil for our producers to use. So they're breaking them down and making our soil rich with nutrients. That way plants can grow again. And you can kind of think of them as Earth's cleanup crew. So you might see mushrooms. Those are fungus. They're fungi, right? You always want to invite mushrooms to the party because they're a fun guy to hang out with. Yeah, I know. Um, there are earthworms that break down decomposing leaves or grass clippings. If you clip your grass and leave it on the lawn, they can break that down and provide nutrients for your soil. So that way the producers are able to grow. You also have bacteria. This picture here is a picture of bacteria in soil, right? We always want to wash our hands because of bacteria, but there are some good bacteria that are in our soil that can decompose and break down things. So without them, though, we would have a lot of rubbish laying around on our earth. So they are good, even though they're kind of gross to think about sometimes. So why do we need to know these different types of consumers is because we're going to start talking about the food chain and food web next week. So how it all links together. So if we look at these three food chains, these are simple food chains, right? They're pretty easy to look at. Next week, we'll start looking at more complex ones, but they all start with a producer. So corn, carrots, and grass are all producers. Then the next organism. So this is saying that the corn's energy is going to the rat. So that means the rat is eating the corn. The carrot's energy is going to the rabbit. So that means the rabbit is eating the carrot. The grass's energy is going to the grasshopper. So that means the grasshopper is eating the grass. So the arrow is pointing to where the energy is going. It's pointing to the eater. The rat, the rabbit, the grasshopper, we can consider those all herbivores because they're eating only a producer. And if you're eating a plant, that means you're an herbivore. Or it could mean you're an omnivore, but since they're not eating anything else but a plant, that would be an herbivore. Then if we look at where the rat's energy is going from. So the rat's energy is going to the owl. So that means the owl's eating the rat. That makes the owl a carnivore. Same thing down here. The rabbit's energy is going to the fox. So that means the fox is eating the rabbit. That means the fox In this picture is a carnivore. Now, if they had him eating also some kind of plant, then we could call him an omnivore. But in this picture, he's only eating the rabbit, so he would be considered a carnivore. Just like the fox's energy is going to the lion. So the lion is the carnivore, and he would be the predator of the fox. So the fox is prey for the lion. And then you can follow the bottom the same way. You can see here's a consumer for the grasshopper, his energy. And then the energy from the frog goes to the python. And then finally the eagle gets the python. So that's what we'll be looking and understanding more next week. But I kind of wanted to give you a snapshot of why you need to know these types of organisms. So that way, when you're looking at a food chain or a food web, you understand how they work. And it's a big cycle because then when the owl, the lion, and the eagle eventually die, decomposers will break their bodies down, scavengers may pick from their bodies, and then we go back to nutrients in the soil to help the grass grow, or the carrots grow, or the corn grow. So it's a big cycle, and we will look at that more again next week. The main thing I would like you to make sure you understand this week is, do you understand the difference between a producer and a consumer? And then, do you know the different types of consumers and their definition? So using Quizlet and vocabulary will definitely help you understand that. I hope you enjoyed this science lesson. Hopefully you didn't do it right before breakfast or lunch, because usually when I teach this in school, most people are feeling a little ooh about their lunch when we have it after lunch. But with that said, it's a part of life, and that's how the cycle works. So I will see you next week when we talk about food chains and food webs.